And hello once again, my name is Lupus, and today I'm just going to be talking about theory, methods, and long-form academic structure. But before we get into that, if you appreciate these videos that I do, and I've made a lot of them, you can support me by checking out my Patreon or by buying some of my books. But we're going to move on from that for now, and instead talk about the actual video. So, theory, methods, and long-form academic structure. Now, let me first just say that I'm speaking from a personal experience. I do have a master's degree in literary theory, and so obviously my particular academic structure that I used was distinct to my particular research, and that is something to keep in mind for every kind of research. Different types of research have different ways in which they present the information. So I'm just going to mostly be talking in a very, very basic sort of primer sense. This is a very, very basic understanding of basically what you should do when you decide to do more postgraduate kind of research and essay writing and stuff like that, right? This is for long form stuff. So think dissertations, think theses. That's what this is for. Okay, so let me go over some of these concepts. Very, very simple. These are things that you need to have, mostly. So, an abstract. This is pretty much in any academic format you'll have an abstract. Generally not in undergraduate, although some undergraduate courses seem to want you to write an abstract, but an abstract is essentially a summarization before you actually finish before you even start reading. It's essentially a summarization of the entire thing, including the results. It's sort of saying, this is what this is. Now, the reason that an abstract exists is because when you're doing research, as someone who's using a lot of, say, papers and stuff like that, you don't want to have to read an entire paper before realizing that it was unnecessary to read, right? An abstract is a useful, beneficial thing to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm studying, this is my basic conclusions, so if this is useful to you, you can read this. That's what an abstract is. And an abstract is also quite famously for a lot of people very irritating to write. I didn't mind writing mine, but a lot of people really don't like writing them. So that's an abstract. It's pretty much always everywhere. Now the next thing I've given in the very, very vague terms of saying scope, present situation, plus proposals. This is very, very broad. So essentially, in the introduction of your long-form academic analysis or whatever it happens to be that you're doing, you essentially have to talk about what you are doing and why you are doing it, right? Your scope, to sort of say, listen, this is what I want to do. This is how far it is going. This is the point of what I am doing. This is why I want to do it. And you'll also be talking about the present situation. You'll say, like, listen, at the moment, there's just not necessarily that much information about this, or it is something that should be studied more, or something along those lines. You're basically just saying, listen, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I think it is important. I think I should be allowed to do this research, and this is why. It's just justifying your decisions, essentially. And then also the last thing I say here is proposals. Now, that will basically be saying, this is what I propose is going to happen, or going to be the effects of things. I use the word proposal because it's very broad. This could also be like a hypothesis, is kind of like a proposal, saying what you think will happen. Or what you plan on doing with this information, like why you are doing this. So that's why I'm keeping this very, very broad, to sort of say, listen, this is what has been done, this is what's currently happening, this is what I want to do, broadly speaking. Now, the next thing is called a literature review. Literature review, I don't really know about the hard sciences, like physics and stuff. I don't know if that will necessarily have a literature review. Mine was in more social science areas. But a literature review is essentially going over going sort of a comprehensive look at existing research in this particular topic. So, in what I studied, I basically had to go and find other people who had written about the thing that I was writing about. So that to be like, okay, I actually need to see, essentially it's to see if someone else has done what you want to do before you have done it, right? Because any kind of long-form academic work, it's supposed to be stuff that hasn't already been done, right? You can't just be redoing things other people have done unless there's a specific reason. Like redoing things in a lot of science areas is very important, because you need to be able to have something that is, it's reliable, it's replicable. You can do it again and get the same results. So to show that the same results happen. That is important. But when it comes to, say, a very specific analysis, this is why, even in like science, you won't necessarily have the exact same thing. Imagine if there was a study and it was like, we got these 10 children from this particular school and we're going to do this experiment on them. If another person came along and said, we're going to take those same 10 people and do the exact same experiment, you would kind of see like, well, what's really the point of that? Whereas if you took 10 children from a different school in a different area to see if they react in the same way, you see, that is different. It's not just repeating the exact same experiment, it is showing that it ought to see if it has wider applicability. So a literature review is very important to see what has come before. Who else has written about this topic that you want to write about? And that's essentially part of your justification for saying, listen, other people have written about it like this, but I want to write it like this. You see, so imagine that my example of, I want to do the study using 10 children here. If you were to say, listen, the study's only been done once, I want to take another 10 children from somewhere else and test. Or what if you were to say, 10 children is not enough children to get this proper result. I want to get 1,000 children and basically repeat the study, but with 1,000 children to see if it still applies. See, that is now, you're looking at the old information and saying, listen, this is what's been done before, but it hasn't been done on a high enough scope. It needs to be bigger. It needs to be more. That is then a justification for your work. So a literature review allows you to show what has come before and why you are doing what you are doing now. Okay, very important to have one. And because otherwise you're just screaming into the void. We all think we have great ideas, but a lot of ideas have already been ideated. So if someone has already come up with an idea, you don't want to just be repeating things because someone is going to say, actually, someone did this already. And if you hadn't, you look like a fool. Then don't look like a fool. Do a literature review. Okay, next thing is methodology. Methodology widely varies based on whatever it is you're studying, right? Think of like the hard sciences. If you want to do chemistry, your methodology will be having a specific environment, a clean environment in which you are able to control all the variables to work on these chemicals to do whatever. Cool. That is your methodology. If you're in, say, sociology, you might say, I want to do this particular methodology, which could be, say, having structured or unstructured interviews, having questionnaires, having sort of observational research. There's all sorts of different types of possible methods that you could do to acquire information. What I did was content analysis, basically, in my master's. I analyzed the text because mine was in literature. So basically, I analyzed a text, which meant that I had to do a close reading of that text. So that was my method. It was content analysis plus additional research from other people, and then applying that to the existing text. So that is a methodology. And there's various methodologies based on whatever it happens to be that you're studying, right? If you're doing agriculture and you want to do an agricultural research project, okay, I want to see, and I just make this simple, I want to see which kind of fertilizer makes this grow faster. I put both of these plants in the exact same type of situation because I want to decrease extraneous variables as much as possible, right? I want it to look like they both have the best shot at surviving, but one gets one type of fertilizer and one gets another type of fertilizer. And now I can track and see through observational research which one is better. I can observe, okay, is this one growing faster? Is this one growing faster? You see, it differs depending on whatever it is that you're studying. The methodology will be different. Now, the theoretical framework is the next thing. Theoretical framework is very broad because the theoretical framework is basically just the perspective through which you interrogate something. Now, when it comes to a lot of the hard sciences, I don't think you really get theoretical frameworks because, growing plants doesn't really change depending on how you view it. You just have to see whether it changes. So this is more in terms of the social sciences. So you could say, I am going to look at this, whatever this is, through a feminist mindset, through a Marxist mindset, through a functionalist mindset, through a new right mindset, through a semiological mindset, all of these are different theoretical frameworks. For my personal studies that I did for my MA, it was through mostly an animal studies perspective, which is a theoretical framework, with a lot of stuff from discursive theory, sort of from Foucault, ecofeminism, and some post-coloniality. So I basically took from multiple different theoretical frameworks to understand what I was doing. So you need to figure out what theoretical framework you want to use when you are doing your long-form analysis, right? You want to say, you can't just look at a thing. You are looking at a thing through a lens. You're trying to understand it through a specific perspective. Okay, the next thing I'm just going to put here is key terms. Key terms, not every type not every university basically requires you to have key terms in the beginning, but key terms can be helpful because you're sort of saying, these are the important terms that you need to know if you want to understand this dissertation or thesis, right? You'll sort of be saying, listen, these words also, especially if you coin any terms, if you create your own concepts, you need to be able to define them, to sort of say, listen, I'm going to be discussing things that I made up, that I created a concept because a concept, like a word did not exist for this concept before I did it. So that is important, to sort of define your terms, to say, this is how I'm analyzing it. Also, definition of terms is just extremely important because language means different things in different places. Think about a very, very simple one, which is the word theory. Theory has multiple definitions based on where it's used. A theory in common language is an opinion. In the hard sciences, a theory is very much not. It is the closest to a fact you're pretty much going to get. The theory of gravity is not an opinion. It is reality. The theory of evolution is not a opinion. It is reality. Whereas a theory in the social sciences is generally a framework through which you understand something. So the word theory has different meanings based on how it is used, which is also why, just in terms of the theory thing, this is why you get a lot of people who misunderstand that kind of important terminological difference, because they will sort of say about, especially say something like evolution, oh, well, it's just a theory. And that shows that they do not understand what the word theory means in the context of science. So different words mean different things. So sometimes you might be using a word in a particular way. So let's say, for instance, in my study, in my MA, I spoke about power. However, what kind of power am I talking about? Because power could mean like the power of a king, or it could also, power can also mean electricity, right? You've powered your home, which doesn't mean that you've given your home the abilities of, or the authority of a king. So the word power is important, and you need to define, what do I mean by power in this? Because imagine if someone read it, and then they went, he's talking about power, but there's no electricity in this story, because the term needs to be defined for what it is. All right, now the next thing, I've given a very, very, very broad term. I've called it results/discussion. Now, not every type of study necessarily has results. So, like mine, which is very philosophical, had basically the entire thing was discussion. It was discussing the concepts. However, a lot of, especially social sciences, you need to show your results. So that would be, you've done interviews, you've done questionnaires, you've done your observational research, you've done experiments, you've done whatever, right? You show your results. And then afterwards, you discuss your results. You sort of say, this is how I have interpreted my results. This is why some of them will be called the interpretation section or something like that. How can you interpret these results? How can you discuss these results? What do these results show? So this varies quite a lot based on essentially what area it is being used in, like what subject this is. And that is something very, very important to keep in mind. That the results/discussion sort of section will often be the bulk of your research or the bulk of your writing, unless it's in a very, very sort of scientific-y mode, in which case it isn't. In that case, it's written. It will often be like the results will be a lot of your stuff, because say for instance, if you are doing questionnaires, or let's say you're doing experiments, you'll have a lot of graphs and tables in your dissertation, but your dissertation will not necessarily be very long in terms of word count. But a lot of that effort went into having to do physical, tangible research where you were sitting and watching people and taking notes. So it does depend a lot on where you are. So let me just give a quick example. I know someone who did an economics master's. Their dissertation was only 15,000 words. But looking at it, it's predominantly graphs. There's lots and lots of graphs. Whereas mine, which is very philosophical, was about 50,000 words. You see, because mine didn't have any graphs, any tables. Mine was all discussion and talk. So essentially, it depends on what you are doing, which can show the difference in how much you have to write and how you're writing it and all that kind of stuff. Now, the next thing I put here is your reference list bibliography. Always reference where your stuff comes from, obviously. No information, like, okay, I'm someone, I marked university assignments and exams, okay? I have seen so many students put in their reference list, now this is undergraduate, this isn't postgraduate, but still, I've seen so many students put my own head or the internet as a reference. Those are not references. It did not come from your own head. It came from a book which you then applied using your own head, but the information did not spring into your head ex nihilo. You know, you didn't create the concepts. You got the concepts from somewhere and you internalized them. So you need to always say where your information comes from and show it definitively based on whatever reference style they want. So for instance, I know the Harvard referencing style very, very well because that is what I did my entire way through university. I also know like the APA style. So, but there are different referencing styles and you need to know how to do it. Some places call it references, some call it bibliography, some use it interchangeably. Some people will get pedantic about one being specific and the other being blah, blah, blah. Whatever. They're both essentially the same thing. Now, the last thing that I'm just going to talk about here is editing. This is not actually part of doing academic whatevers, but you need to edit your stuff. You need to actually read over it to make sure it's good. Now, this is something also to keep in mind. Not everybody is necessarily great at language. That's fine. Being bad at language or not good at language is not it doesn't mean anything negative. Okay? Some people are not as good at constructing sentences. Some people make typos. It happens. So that's why, with a lot of these, you need to get an editor, someone who can go over it and say, listen, these things need to be fixed. In my case, I'm literally like an English teacher, and I've been an editor, and I'm a professional writer, so I didn't need an editor. But a lot of people do need editors, and it is very, very beneficial to have an editor if you need one. So make sure that you edit your work, make sure that it is as professional as possible before it is submitted. And that is pretty much everything. That's just a sort of a brief overview of the kind of things that you need to do if you are looking into doing postgraduate sort of research and discussion and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully this has been beneficial and helpful. And if it has, and if you would like to support the kind of videos I do, because I've made lots of these educational videos plus other videos, and I'm going to be soon making other kinds of videos, which should be fun. But if you would like to support me, you can check out my Patreon, or you can check out my books. Both would be very, very appreciated. You can find them in the description. And that's about it. So I hope that you have a great day, week, and month ahead, and goodbye.